Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new Two Cyber Chicks podcast. You're about to join Erika and Jax for an inclusive cybersecurity conversation designed to educate and break the stereotypes of cybersecurity professionals while providing life hacks on how to handle burnout, networking, and goal setting. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Hey everyone, welcome back to our podcast. Erika, are you ready for this?
Girl, I am pumped to bring on our special guest. I'll let you intro him.
Love it. Yeah, I'm very, very excited about our guest. So we do have a special guest, as always, on our show. Now, Dave is amazing. We're going to dive into a little bit of his background, but during this show, we're going to dive a little bit further as he is going to be talking about kind of what he's doing in this space. Dave Mason has dedicated his career to bridging the often challenging gap between leadership and IT, as we know, is a very challenging area, especially in the mid-market sector. Now, Dave Mason is also someone who he has recognized this unique challenge, and he's facing it head on, which this sector contributes to 1/3 of the economy, yet it finds itself really overlooked in the cybersecurity shadows, if you may say. So after Dave successfully exited his first IT service venture, he then saw the vast ocean of opportunities in this mid-market space, especially concerning cybersecurity, and recognizing also the intricacies of risk and technology and finance. He made it really his mission to optimize these intersections for small and medium-sized enterprises. So he really understands that while cybersecurity talent pool may be limited, innovation tools and expertise with consultants and everything, he still finds a way to scale it with those subject matter expertise. So we're going to be talking about all of these things. Also, on top of all of that, Dave is also a communicator. He is a bridge builder and someone who speaks the language of both IT professionals and the business leaders. So we are excited to have him on the show and dive into understanding what is the mid-market sector and what do those challenges look like. So, all right, Erika, are you ready for this? Let's bring Dave on the show.
Let's go.
Woohoo.
Dave.
Welcome, Dave.
Welcome. We're so thrilled to have you. Yeah, of course. It's our pleasure. So before we jump in, can you take a few minutes just to provide our listeners with a high-level overview of cybersecurity concerns, challenges between a mid-market company versus an enterprise, and why you chose to focus your work in the mid-market space?
Great. So I started my IT services company working in the SMB space, and which touched kind of the lower end of the mid-market. And I met so many dedicated IT leaders at mid-sized companies that really were just kind of struggling to really do a good job because the hand that they were dealt was just not a good one. And mid-market is unique, where enterprise has such constant refresh and oversight. You have a board of directors who their role is to de-risk the company, and you have schedules where, okay, we're going to rip and replace all our equipment every 3 years, whether we need to or not. The SMB space has the MSP sector, which does a pretty good job of helping businesses that don't have internal IT teams with their IT. But in the mid-market, you have these leaders of small internal IT teams that are really struggling to get the resources that they need to do a good job. And they also have some added challenges where mid-market is often a mix of these legacy systems that the leadership can't afford to replace, and new systems because that's what they bought in their last purchasing cycle. So you got this mishmash of legacy systems combined with the challenge of limited budgets and limited expertise as to how to secure it. So we often find leaders in mid-market companies have a lot of weight on their shoulders, and a leadership team that these guys don't speak tech, like they just don't get it. So often unfortunately, their pleas fall on deaf ears. And so kudos to those individuals that are trying to protect their companies from massive cyber risk out there, because mid-market is absolutely a target. So it's a really unique situation, and certainly I'm doing my best to try and help out.
So quick follow-up, Dave. So if you had to boil it down to top 3 unique challenges, cybersecurity focused, that the mid-market is faced with compared to the enterprise counterparts, just in your professional experience, what would those top 3 would be?
So I think the first that comes to mind is really having a voice at the leadership table. And enterprise, you have a CIO, and you might have several C-level leaders that are sitting in with the rest of the leadership team and advocating for better cybersecurity. Where in many of these companies in the mid-market, you don't have a voice at the leadership table, and there's still that attitude that he's or she's just the IT guy. They just fix the printers, right? When we know that there's so much more that these people are doing for these companies, and they often don't get listened to, and even though they know they need better security, they can't always access it. And so it's the leadership communication that is often lacking in the mid-market that you don't see on the enterprise side. I think the second challenge is, as I mentioned, is the environments, right? It's not always the best equipment that they're dealing with, right? They have to keep systems up that probably should have been put to bed 5 or 6 years ago. That's not easy, right? When patches aren't available for things anymore, and there's lots of IT leaders that are living with that. And mid-market it's very diverse, right? There's a $900 million company may still be considered mid-market, and that's looks a lot like enterprise and really well run. But there's a lot of mid-market companies that look a lot like SMBs and are mid-tier antivirus and a firewall, and that's cybersecurity, right? That's all they're doing, or all they can do. So, and I think a third challenge is really many of these individuals are on small teams, and they're isolated. They don't see what's going on in the marketplace the same way that people in enterprise or even in the MSP space does, because they don't go to conferences. I think your podcast is really a great resource for individuals in this situation, because they are able to hear what's going on outside of their team, outside of their company, and that's so important. And certainly I encourage anybody in that situation to be kind of looking for anybody that can bring knowledge and expertise to their roles.
Well, certainly appreciate that feedback, Dave. And if I had to boil it down to the Cliff Note version, it sounds like lack of representation and the right representation, budgetary constraints, and then the isolation, the lack of seeing a big picture. And what comes to mind initially is that maybe lack of buy-in at the executive level of, hey, we need somebody designated to this role, this connector of sorts or translator. Because if you have that role in place, then I think that the buy-in for the budgetary becomes stronger. The isolation, the big picture, those things can become more united, so to speak, if you have the right connector in place. So do you have any advice or strategies for, I think of myself as a consultant, sometimes seeing this like void of leadership, and how do I help my clients basically manage that conversation or consult them in getting that buy-in on their side? Because again, that's not my decision to make, but how can I consult them to showing leadership why that role is so significant?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Erika. Like, it is that is such a problem in the space, and with leadership in a company, they often don't know what to ask for, and sometimes a third party that they hear the same information from, and I'm sure this is very frustrating for IT leaders who work in those companies. It's like, hey, I told you the same thing, boss, but when you hear it from a third party, you somehow listen. So I think the rise of the virtual CIO, which we're seeing more and more of, I think is a really, really positive thing that's happening in the space. And those presidents of these companies in the space are really kind of like starting to come around to, hey, maybe I need a little bit more. But listen to your IT person who works in your company every day, because they're probably an underutilized resource. And if you're in the consultant space, then yeah, like work with these people. And I think having worked with many IT leaders, sometimes they are a little bit protective of like their role in the company and the CFO or the president's ear. And I think being open to a third party coming in and delivering the same message, sometimes that's just all they need, is to hear it from somebody else. And so if you're in the consultant space, you're working on the same side as that IT person is really what you need to be doing. And if you're the IT person in the space, find other voices.
Yeah, that's valid. And I love that Erika did that follow-up question, because I too work in the consulting space, and you see a lot of these challenges on an everyday basis, like every one of my clients. So it's definitely a common theme. I do want to pivot a little bit from this topic, just a little bit, but still staying in the mid-market sector. So one of the things that I have recognized, especially like when you and I connected, and then I was doing a little bit more research about the mid-market sector and some of the challenges that I have seen, is that, you've got this mid-market sector, almost kind of a forgotten sector in a lot of ways. And these companies will sometimes have to navigate between enterprise level solutions or tools that are designed maybe even for like smaller businesses. So they kind of have to figure out, okay, what am I going to go for? An enterprise solution that may cost me more, but might be better suited, but it's going to definitely be a bigger solution than what I need, or something smaller that might not meet their needs. So with that in mind, what recommendations do you have to help find that balance for them in terms of cybersecurity investments and implementation being in that mid-market sector?
Yeah, great question, Jax, and that's my whole life these days is I started my company, which is 300 Cybersecurity, to really deliver mid-market tools that are often used in the MSP channel to leaders of small internal IT teams, because those tools are really well suited for mid-sized organizations, and just the ease of installation, lack of capital investment required, the ability to pay on a per seat basis, on a monthly basis, just make them easier to digest for leadership in mid-market companies. And those tools are designed for that size range. So having the ability to sort of find those tools is not as easy as it should be, which I think is one of the challenges. And so I reach out, I talk to obviously a lot of leaders in this space. And often if they've come from enterprise, which many of them have, they kind of go back to the enterprise tools. And sometimes that works great. Like there's enterprise tools that translate really, really well into mid-market, and the billing works. But then sometimes there's like massive capital expenditures. I can think of one instance where they spent probably $50,000 on capital outlay on a device that basically sends them alerts that they don't understand. It's not very effective because that's designed for a SOC.
Right.
And that, the full SOC team that's manned 24/7, that's what that's designed for. But this is a small team of 3 people. So that's a challenge, and it's not easy. So I think doing the research and being open to companies that you might not know their name. There's a lot of billion-dollar companies that people just don't know their name, and they're not household names like sort of Sophos or CrowdStrike, where they have massive marketing targeted at enterprise, SMB, and at all points in between. But that those names that you just might not have heard of doesn't mean they're not good. And doing your research, and there are a number of websites that do sort of contrast to compare. That'll give you some information on some of those channel partners. And if you hear something that's good, like dig in and also talk to other leaders. And I think that's super important is if you're in your company and you don't talk to a lot of external IT people, try and start, because they're the people that do your job somewhere else are the best resource for you.
That peer-to-peer conversation. I mean, I think of like-minded individuals that are in the same types of roles. It's great to have that kind of connection to figure out, like, hey, I'm not the only one dealing with these challenges. Like, even across industries and across different types of roles, I think that's just such sage advice, because oftentimes we're looking for mentorship or peers or guidance, like within our organization, and like, let's branch out. So I love that, Dave. Clearly, I mean, we've been talking about this communication gap, right, with leadership and IT team and mid-market businesses. I mean, I even see this communication gap barrier in my line of work. I mean, dealing with engineers and getting them to understand cyber regulations, or why they need to have FIPS configured a certain way, or they need to have encryption a certain way, right? Like, these technical safeguards, and they trying to kind of be that communicator. So this is something that truly resonates with me, something that you do and, is one of your expertise areas. Can you share an example from your experience where this communication gap posed a significant challenge, and how you overcame that with your skill set?
Yeah, and I think it's the sad answer is that communication gap doesn't get overcome as much as it should. I've been in too many situations where, but part of our process at times is to do some penetration type testing. We have a tool that we use that simulates what would happen if in that organization if somebody set on a phishing link. And I've seen organizations fail, not miserably, but pretty darn close. Like, this thing goes in and runs, and no bells and whistles go off. And then we go back to the leadership, and they're like, "Yeah, we know it's a problem." And the management, they don't seem to listen. They don't care, right? Like, that's a guy that's checked out, right? That guy had checked out, and it's hard. It's a tough position to be in. So certainly that's unfortunately the case in a lot of times. But I think the successes that I've seen is when somebody introduces a third party, in this, in cases it's me, that can come in and sit down and just kind of deliver the message in a different way, and to hear it from somebody else who is an expert, even though the IT person is talking about this for years. Sometimes that's just the message, and I think that's you have to change the conversation somehow, right? Because if it's just you go to your leadership and say, we need this, and they say, yeah, you just like toys, or who knows? So many leaders and owners just see this as a cost center, right? You look at the capabilities of your average SMB today, it is far beyond what anybody in the enterprise could have dreamed of 20 years ago, right? Even what we're doing right now is just in 2005 would have been revolutionary technology. So leaders don't realize that their companies are capable of so much more because of technology, and part of that capability is you got to make some investments. So I think just having the conversation, say, look, like, this is a strategic advantage for your business. You need to stop thinking this is a cost center and just a cost center. Nobody likes to spend money, right? And especially in that medium-sized business where it's, do I spend the money on cybersecurity, or do I spend it on sales? Everybody likes more revenue. But the reality is some of that money has to be diverted, else a disaster may happen. And having somebody who can go with you and have that conversation, that's where I've seen the successes. you got to change hearts and minds at the top in order for the purse strings to be let out.
Hearts and minds, that's what it's about. It's relationship building. It's key. And I know in our space, being in the consulting space, that's the number one thing is you've got to build the relationship with your client. You've got to become an intricate part of their team to support them within their mission, make their lives easier. But it's back to what you said, like it's being that outside person coming in. Maybe somebody within the org is saying the exact same thing that you're saying, but just because it's come from that trusted vendor that we've hired on, they're more apt to listen. Plus it's credibility. It's that credibility piece that you're doing and making that huge impact in this space. So that's awesome. We need more Daves. So, all right. One more question before we wrap up, because something that we like to do on this podcast is like demystify certain sectors or get like inputs and thoughts of like, if you had a big magic wand, what would you do within this space? So being that you're working in this space and you're seeing the challenges in the space, if you could have like a big magic wand and you can envision the future of cybersecurity for that mid-market sector specifically and say like, in the next, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, 10's pretty long. So let's just say, 5 years from now, and you can make this huge change, what top 3 tips would you offer to that mid-market for them to succeed? That if you started doing this, your world would change in the next 5 years.
Yeah, great question. I think number one is use the existing tools that are out there. Right. We all know that there is a labor shortage, chronic labor shortage in cybersecurity. We don't have to all become absolute cybersecurity experts because there's tools out there that'll do a lot of the heavy lifting. Go ahead and engage with those tools. Get your leadership and every employee in your company on board with cybersecurity, right? Your biggest challenge is your employee base. And once you engage them within the cybersecurity and sort of keeping the company safe, then that would be amazing. Like that's perfect. And then I think kind of finally, I'd like to see just like a shift to think that IT is strategic in this space. And that we are going to stop, running systems into the ground, and that we are going to, embrace the fact that we need to spend on cybersecurity, and also at the same time, like embrace what's new. Like AI is going to change our lives dramatically in the next 5 years. It's going to touch every business. I'd like to see the mid-market being a leader on that shift as well. So. I think those are 3 things that would, if we can change the attitude in the mid-market about technology and cybersecurity in particular, then all the pieces are there for us to be successful.
All right, you guys heard it here first. Let's move the needle.
Yeah.
Let's get things rolling. Dave, thank you so much for these valuable insights. This has been such a wonderful episode. You've been a phenomenal guest. It's been such a pleasure having you on. Dave, for any of our listeners or viewers that want to follow your journey, want to learn more about you, what is the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. Either 300 Cybersecurity or Dave Mason, and find my picture. There'll be a few Dave Masons out there, but that's probably the best way to track me down. Love to hear questions. Awesome. and encourage reach out.
Love it. So thank you so much, Dave. Really appreciate it. And for those of you that caught our show, thank you for tuning in. As always, please subscribe wherever you're listening or watching this from. If you have any guest suggestions, any topics you'd like to hear about, shoot us an email at 2cyberchicks@gmail.com. We'll catch you on the next one.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of 2 Cyber Chicks podcast with Erika and Jax. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.